Welcome to the LEAPS Year 2 Budget Webinar. The team is excited to review the revised budget template with you and move forward with the Year 2 of the LEAPS project. A copy of this PowerPoint and a link to the recording will be provided to all vendors and posted on the OCFS LEAPS page. Please enter any questions you have in the Q&A section. The LEAPS team will gather all questions from each of the webinar deliveries and develop a complete Q&A document that will be provided to all and posted for later reference. Let me introduce the Program Development and Contract Management Unit, also known as the OCFS LEAPS team. The LEAPS Program Management team consists of a manager, myself, Linda Dara, 2 supervisors, Sophia Ickles and Kathleen McGarry, and 6 program managers. We currently have 1 program manager vacancy, which we hope to fill soon. This team is your front line and are available for technical assistance, contract development, claim processing, and program report reviews. This team is supporting you to develop the Year 2 budget and will be contacting you soon to schedule site visits in the 2025-26 period. We look forward to scheduling site visits and meeting with your LEAPS program staff. I'd also like to introduce you to the Contract Management and Support Unit, or CMSU. This team consists of the unit supervisor, Jeff Stoller, and 3 contract managers. This unit supports the program managers and LEAPS contractors. They review the LEAPS budgets and claims for compliance with eligible expenses, and they communicate with the Office of the State Comptroller, also known as OSC, whenever questions arise on claim submissions. A new budget for Year 2 is required to include a 3% increase to the annual funding. The additional funding can help programs meet or exceed the minimum wage requirements, or programs may choose how to include this value into their Year 2 budget if all staff are at or above minimum wage. You may have noticed that each of the budget categories is pre-filled with recommended broad expense lines. These were developed with Year 1 claiming needs in mind, as we recognize that budget language was written too specific and limited the claiming of items that were not anticipated, but are still essential to the quality and success of the LEAPS program. We understand that the needs and interests of the youth and families may change, and youth choice is an essential component of LEAPS and the Positive Youth Development, or PYD, work plan. For example, a subcontractor line may have been included for karate, and the youth have expressed a preference for chess. In Year 1, this impacted the ability to process claims for chess services. Now the category line will reflect PYD consultant, reducing the need for spending adjustments or budget modifications. We will go into more depth on the Year 2 budget in a moment. The Year 2 revised budget templates were sent out to all LEAPS contractors via email on Thursday, September 11th. You may have noticed that this included 2 separate documents. One document should be used if direct charging administrative costs. The other document is to be used if utilizing an indirect line. It is recommended that you use the same method for these expenses that you used in Year 1. The location to enter fringe in the Personnel tab of the indirect budget was originally locked in error. A revised version was sent on Monday, September 15th. This version is correct and allows you to enter the fringe appropriately. If your document was already otherwise complete, please reach out to your program manager and they can have the cell on the original form unlocked and then send it back to you. That way you don't have to re-enter everything on the revised Year 2 template. The OCFS LEAPS team has been working hard to revise the annual budget template. You will see in the first picture on the left the 3% increase that we talked about. It's been added as a line on the summary page. This funding may be used for any eligible expense. As previously stated, all staff must be paid at least minimum wage. A portion of this increase may be included in the budgeted admin or indirect funding lines. As you can see in the picture on the right, we have added the broad budget lines within most of the categories. We drew from the experience we all shared in year one regarding claiming disallowances, spending adjustments, etc. Our goal is to minimize the need for any changes throughout the year and maximize eligible reimbursement. Sophia Ickles will now provide a walkthrough of the Year 2 budget templates.
Thank you, Linda. So first, we're going to look at the indirect budget, and that's the budget that you would use if all of your administrative and direct expenses are contained within one budget line. So on the screen is the instructions, which is the first tab of the indirect budget template. This includes all the instructions for completing the budget template. Please review the instructions before completing your budget. All expenses need to relate to your budget and contractual obligations, and they're required to directly support LEAPS programming. Now let's look at the second tab, which is the annual budget summary. So you are only responsible for completing the light blue parts of this budget summary. So that includes the vendor name, the contract number, and the school district. And then lower on the page, it includes the site capacity. Please use the same order as in your original budget. So for example, if your site capacity at site 1 is 50 and site 2 is 50, you will see that it pre-fills to what your annual award will be. It totals the award. And you'll also notice that there's a year 2 increase of 3% of your total award amount. So that will pre-fill as well to give you your total budget award. You'll also notice on this page that it includes your maximum administrative percentage. So you can use up to that amount, but you cannot exceed that amount. So that is all calculated on this summary page. You'll also notice that there's the red under the total because in this example, we don't have any other cost. So once all of your costs are listed for each of your budget categories, it'll total, and then the total needs to be exact what your award value is. So the total there should be the exact as in the yellow. And if there's any discrepancy, it'll continue to be red until they are exact. Now let's look at the salary and friends section. So a couple of things you'll note. There's no local share. There's no longer a local share column on the budget. We're only capturing OCFS LEAPS funding. Also, in this indirect budget, there's no columns to capture administrative cost because all administrative cost should be captured in the indirect line of the budget. So the first column is the title. So for example, we have a director and we have one staff in that title with an annual salary of $100,000. And of that salary, 50% is part of that contract, of this contract. And so you'll see how the OCFS annual funding pre-fills to $50,000. And for another example, if we have group leaders in the title, And we have 16 group leaders at $20,000, and 100% of those staff are on the budget. You'll see how it pre-fills to $320,000. No, you are able to make changes from your original year one budget. So you can make changes in the salary amounts. You're able to add staff as needed for your program, but you are still confined to following the staffing ratios to meet your budgeted capacity. And you must also have a director listed to meet that requirement. And if you happen to use another title like project manager or something like that, if you scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll notice that there's a section to say if the program director has an alternate title, specify here. So that's where you would put, project manager is filling the duties of the program director, just so we can ensure that that program director's duties are being filled. And you'll also notice on the bottom in the blue, there's the total fringe. So you would list the total fringe for all programmatic staff, because again, any administrative expenses for staff would be in the indirect section of your budget. And next, we're going to look at the A1. Notice in the A1 section, you will have to specify if you're doing the 15% indirect charge, A. So if you wanted to click A, you can do that. And then you have to click on the attestation. And you'll also notice on the A1, which is different than your previous year one budget, is that this only contains programmatic duties because, again, all of the administrative duties would not be captured here because we would just be capturing the programmatic duties for the staff listed in the personnel section. You'll also note that the titles listed in your personnel section, they carry over to your A1. So you see your director and your group leaders, and then you can go and click as applicable what their programmatic duties are for each of your staff. And next we'll go to the contractual consultant category. So you notice in this category, we have pre-filled 3 lines for positive youth development consultants, maintenance consultants, program evaluation, and rent. This was pre-populated to the popular choices for vendors. The positive youth development consultants, that captures all of your contractors utilized to complete positive youth development activities. So this examples include recreational consultants for sports, dance, martial arts, STEAM consultants. They should all be contained within this line. You do not need to make separate lines to capture those things. All your positive youth development activities for consultants in this category should be captured in that one line. And they would all be P cost. So that's the only column that you have there because these, again, should only be programmatic cost. So for example, if we had positive youth development consultants at $50,000, then it would carry over to the annual OCFS funding section. And for the other lines, if you don't happen to have maintenance consultants or program evaluation, or maybe you're working directly in the school so you don't have rent costs, that's fine. You can just leave those blank. We do recommend that you don't remove the lines just for flexibility. If later on you need to utilize those lines or you have different needs, we just want to make sure that the budget is flexible. So we recommend that you keep all the budget template lines. And if you scroll down, you'll see the narrative. So you'll see again that the positive youth development consultants, they're all of the consultants that you use for positive youth development. And then we have some suggested narratives. If you have positive youth development consultants that you want to add a little bit more than what is listed in the example, you're free to do that. But please don't remove anything because, again, we just want to keep these as flexible as possible. And although your current needs might be one thing, they might change, and we want to just have that flexibility. And the next section we'll look at is travel. So travel expenses should capture the travel expenses for staff only. Any travel expenses related to students and families, like field trips, for example, those should be captured in the other section of the budget. So the two relisted lines is the after school conference. And this includes all of your professional development related to LEAPS, after school related conferences, networking with other after school programs, resource development. All of that should be captured in your after school conference line. For instance, if you estimate, and this is based on the New York State guidelines for mileage and per diems and hotel rates. So if you've calculated that to say $3,000, that would pre-fill in the OCFS funding column. And then if your staff mileage, you calculate to be about $500, that would calculate over to your OCFS funding category. And for mileage, this includes any of your staff mileage related to the program. So it could be traveling between sites. It can be pickup and delivery of after school program supplies, visits, all the visits, everything programmatic related to the program that staff use for mileage, it should be captured in this section. And next, we'll look at the, and just as a reminder, any travel outside of New York State submitted for reimbursement must be approved prior to travel by OCFS. And next, we'll look at the equipment section. Now, the equipment section, you'll notice that you can't add anything to this. So this is for items if an individual unit exceeds $5,000. So this is rarely used. So we just kind of kept it where you couldn't access it, just an error. But if you do have a need, if you do have an individual unit item that is over $5,000, please reach out to your program manager and they can work with you on adjusting the form so that you can list those costs. And in the next section, we have the supplies. So you'll note under the supplies section, it's just one line for program supplies. And that should capture all of your program supplies. This is for any items that are under $5,000 and consumable within the contract period. So all of your program supplies related to any supplies for recreation, any supplies for arts, any supplies. If you have office supplies, you don't need to do a separate line for those because if they're office supplies programmatic office supplies, they would just go into that program supplies category. All program supplies related to LEAPS should go into that one line and should be captured using one amount. So in this, for example, if you have $5,000 in program supplies, you would just put it under the P category, and the OCFS annual OCFS funding amount will pre-populate for that value. And the last section of the budget is other. Now you'll see in the other section, we have several lines. The other section is this category is for expenses that do not fit within any other budget category. So there's examples of indirect costs, which is the first one. It's also your professional development and insurance, field trips, busing, background checks, etc. So we tried to capture all the common areas of other expenses for our vendors. You'll note that the indirect costs, the first line, only has one area for a cost, because that's the only one that you should have. That's the only administrative expense you should have in this entire budget. So that's why everything else is grayed out. You would list your indirect cost. Again, they cannot exceed 15% of your annual award. And then for the other lines, you would list what those costs are for your LEAPS program. And now we'll take a look at your direct budget. So starting with the beginning, the instructions tab for the direct budget. This will be the same. So there's no, I mean, this will be the same in that there are instructions that you should review prior to completing the budget. The next section, the annual budget category. So this is also similar, where you have the light blue that you need to complete. You have all the categories of expenses that will pre-fill once the budget categories are complete. And then at the bottom, you have the site capacity at each site. And once you pre-fill that, so for instance, if it's the same, 50 for each, it'll also give you your total award value. And you'll see again the same with you'll have the 3% increase that is also included in your total award value. You have the same maximum administrative amount of the 15%, whether or not it's direct or indirect. So that amount is also calculated at the bottom. And next we'll go over the salary and fringe. So for the administrative budget, you'll notice that there are more columns. So you'll have the space to put in columns for your percent of administrative work. So if we use the same example of a director, that is one director, and they have the same $100,000 annual salary, and 100% of their salaries on this contract. But now we have to say what percentage of time is on administrative work for this contract. So say it's 10% administrative, and then the other 90% is program. Then it'll calculate the total value. And then if we have the group leaders, again, for example of a title, and we have the 16 group leaders at $20,000, also 100% of the contract. And their percent of admin work is 0. So we would leave that blank, or we can add a 0. And then for program, we have 100%. And then it calculates that $320,000. And next we'll go over the A1 tab. So some differences you'll see is that there is a line to put the percentage of effort for admin and program, and that pre-fills from the personnel section. And you'll also notice that now we have areas to put in admin duties. So you would pre-fill what the staff's admin duties are, what their programmatic duties are for each staff. And please note, if you have listed them as having all administrative duties, then you shouldn't be clicking program duties work, and vice versa. If you said they're all program duties, please don't list also include administrative duties. And next, we'll look at the contractual consultant tab. For this tab, you'll also see that there are the columns for A cost and P cost. So in addition to the pre-filled lines, you'll have those A and P costs. You'll also note that there's some more examples in the direct budget because it does have administrative expenses. So you'll see your financial consultants, maintenance consultants, and other, in addition to the program evaluation and rent, because those may potentially also have an administrative value. So for instance, for your PYD consultants, those will likely be all program in this example. So we have a programmatic cost for PYD consultants of $50,000, for instance. That would repopulate. You'll see under financial consultants, the P is grayed out because we assume that financial consultants is strictly administrative. So you can list a value for that if you have financial consultants that you contract with. And then you have your lines for your maintenance consultants and then program evaluation and rent. So if there's a split value, that's fine. You just list how much of the value is administrative and how much of the value is programmatic. So for program evaluation, say the total cost is 50,000, but of that 10,000 should be attributed to the administrative. And then the other 40,000 is programmatic. You would just list it as so in your budget. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the pre-filled examples for the narrative. Again, you can add to the narrative. If there's something that you don't use, we suggest that you just keep those values on your budget. And the next section is travel. Look at that. And that's the same as your indirect. It would be after school conference, staff mileage. But again, you'll notice that there's the A and P columns that you would use as applicable for those. And equipment is the same. If you go to the equipment section, and that there is A and P cost. And again, equipment is for those for a single individual unit that's over $5,000. So if you have multiple units and the total cost is 5,000 or over, that's still under supplies. And next we have the supplies category. And supplies, you'll see that broken out for program supplies, and then we have office supplies example and maintenance, building maintenance supplies. So you'll see the program supplies, the A is grayed out because program supplies would be strictly programmatic. And then for office supplies and building maintenance supplies, you see how the P is grayed out because that's only capturing administrative office supplies and administrative building maintenance supplies. If it's programmatic office supplies or programmatic building maintenance supplies, that'll just be captured within program supplies. And the final section of the budget, other, you'll see the same examples of some traditional other expense categories. Again, other expenses captures those items that are not captured in the other sections. If you have any additional things, you can add that. But even that, we just always suggest that you do not delete anything because, again, needs changed and we want to keep budgets flexible. And as always, if you have any questions about either your direct or indirect budget, please reach out to your program manager. And once these are complete, please email them to your program manager. And next, I'm going to turn it back over to Linda. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. That was very helpful. Just a reminder, the miscellaneous expense category should remain blank. This should not be used during budget development. It's a placeholder for unforeseen allowable expenses that you have a discussion with your program manager and obtain pre-approval before using this line. Permit fees were added, but if you have other unique extended hour fees, a lot of New York City programs have some unique costs, make sure they're included in your budget. Talk with your program manager if you have any questions regarding that. The Year 2 tasks include completing the budget, as we just reviewed. The budget template has new suggested budget lines and the 3% annual budget increase that Sophia just went over with us. Complete this template based on your projected spending for Year 2. Utilize those new budget lines as applicable to list your expenses. If there are additional expenses which don't fall into these, you can add them. Just review it with your program manager. Discuss any program proposed changes or other contract document changes in Year 2, including your work plan activities, performance targets, with your program manager. Some changes may require a full contract amendment. All require OCFS pre-approval to support claiming. As another reminder, you must have up-to-date copies of your workers' compensation and disability insurance certificates. Please submit them to your program manager for our records. Subcontract agreements must be current and approved and on file with OCFS. If you've added any new subcontractors in Year 2, or if your existing agreements expired in the 24-25 contract year, we must have updated subcontractor agreements. 3 bids are required for any subcontractor service whose total service agreement will be more than $15,000 over the 5-year term of the contract. Bids must be in writing and maintained for review. Ensure that your vendor responsibility questionnaire is recertified and up to date. It must be recertified every 6 months and updated upon certification should a change be noted. Vendor responsibility requirements must also be followed by any subcontractors that are identified. Contact your program manager if you have any questions regarding these required documents. All Year 1 claims must be submitted no later than November 30th. This includes any supplemental claims. A Year 1 claiming complete attestation must also be completed. We cannot move forward with Year 2 until all claims have been processed for Year 1. This will provide Year 1 reimbursement to you and the OCFS LEAPS team time to process these claims before the year 2 quarter 1 claim deadline of December 30th, 2025. The program managers will also begin performing site visits in year 2. They will be splitting their time between these visits and claim review duties. Vendors were given the choice of method to claim the LEAPS contract-related administrative and indirect expenses. As Sophia just reviewed with us, make sure you're using the correct template. The administrative and indirect, which is also a component of the admin expenses, the budget lines are developed based on your annual programmatic categories being fully expended. These expenses are limited to the maximum of 15%, regardless of the method you choose to claim them. That has been calculated for you in the summary page, as Sophia showed. Vendors are encouraged to consult with their financial advisors prior to making a choice. It is recommended that this choice remain consistent from your year 1. The year 1 advance payments were scheduled to be recouped within the first 10 months of your year 1 claiming. Some contract expenditures were insufficient to fully recoup these funds in year 1. Additionally, some contracts were reimbursed for administrative or indirect expenses that exceeded the allowable value. The recoupment process for any outstanding funds will be discussed individually with you and your program manager based on your unique situation. There are no advances for year 2 or years going forward. The advances were only authorized for the first year of funding. Year 2 claiming will be on a quarterly basis, and the first claim for year 2 will be quarter 1. This is the period of September through November. OCFS team will process these claims as quickly as possible to provide year 2 funding reimbursement in a timely manner. Remember, quarterly claiming reduces the number of claims you must submit, and that must be reviewed by your program manager. Thank you for joining us for the year 2 budget overview. A copy of the PowerPoint and webinar recording will be made available soon. The LEAPS team will review all the questions submitted from each of the budget webinar deliveries and create one Q&A document to be released as soon as possible. Have a wonderful rest of your day.